Hello, folks. This is Gender in Focus, a podcast exploring how to create a more inclusive world for trans and non-binary people. I'm your host, Kai Scott, and I use the pronouns he and him. I'm the president of Transfocus Consulting. Each week, I dive into real stories and expert advice, offering practical tips and actionable takeaways to help you lead with kindness, confidence, and heart. Tune in to discover how you can make a positive difference. It's just a conversation away. In today's episode, in honor of Indigenous History Month, I'm joined by Chase Willier on Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh lands, in what is also known as Vancouver. Chase, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited and grateful that you're here. Would you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your life experience?
Thanks, Kai. Tansay Chase Willier. Otsinia Satellite, Onuskaponik, Nia Nehiao, Negawi, Dorian Spence, Goodfish Lake, Satellite Cree Nation, Equa, Miles Willier, Notawepan, Sucker Creek First Nation. I'm a Sixties Scoop kid, so I was raised in Skszwx Nation and adopted by the late elder Glenn Douglas, Nerkustian, raised in Okanagan, and retired Mountie, actually, who worked in many First Nations community in the province. And I'm a father of a beautiful little girl and married, and we live in East Vancouver.
And it's so powerful that you began speaking your own tongue.
I'm just a little bit, but I try.
That's impressive, I will say. It takes a lot of effort to get to that stage.
Well, I've got some really great kin around me right now, as you know, from Treaty 6, James McCocus, my relative, Dr. Lana Whiskey Jack, and so many beautiful people and their relatives and relations that it's hard not to be feeling the goodness and hearing all your language after spending my entire life hearing other people, their languages. Yeah. Being 60 Scoop, I was raised in the Okanagan, which is Skszwx territory. And when I started working with the West Bank Indian Band, which is now called the West Bank First Nation, out of Kelowna detachment, of course I heard Okanagan, which is, I cannot pronounce how they say their Skszwx language in Skillin or something like that. But if I've mispronounced it, I have to apologize because that was a really bad rendition of their language. But I've heard a lot of Okanagan being spoken through Glenn and other elders since 1983 onward, and other elders who are still friends of mine. Then I moved to the coast and I worked with Squamish Nation and Tsleil-Waututh in the RCMP in the 90s. So I heard a lot of Coast Salish, of Snitchin and the Hallmark-Malin languages being spoken. So I have to say that it really is incredibly meaningful. It's so healing. It's so profound in so many ways that I can't even describe when you hear your language being spoken with people that are fluent and you receive, all that goodness, your teachings and all the good stuff that comes with it. I don't even know if I can put words to what that brings to my life. And that disconnection through colonization in the 60s Scoop. So I'm still learning. I'm an old dog, but I'm still learning. So
I think it's amazing, and I'm so glad that you've taken the time. It does take time and energy and commitment to essentially reconnect and be able to build those bridges. And like you said, you have help along the way, but it still requires you to make those steps. And there's a gift in doing that by having that deep inner connection and resonance, right?
Totally.
By speaking your own language.
It's funny because you grow, you become, you know who you are, right? In such a deeper way that you just really learn to become that in our own Nehio ways, our duties, our obligations, our responsibilities as a Cree person with Cree law or Nehio law, right? So I probably just in the last 2 years had so much more depth in my life that again I can't even articulate the meaning and the heartfelt love that I feel for my Treaty 6 kin as well as my Treaty 8 kin, but yes.
Oh, that's amazing. And speaking of being yourself, it's, I think, really important to define a few terms, a few basics here. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts and reflections on a very important term, Two-Spirit. It's not the only term. Certainly there are many other nation-specific terms, but I think it's an important kind of pan-national organizing term. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it and how you define it for yourself and for others.
And it's funny, you picked up on it really quickly in terms of other nations and their own definitions, right? But I think everybody, when they hear Two-Spirit, they automatically go to that term that came out of the 1990s, early 1990s in Manitoba from the gathering,
Right.
where they essentially needed to find and agree upon a term so people could use as something. So they came up with Two-Spirit, which didn't necessarily and doesn't mean just male, female binary or that you have two spirits in your body. Right. So what I like in terms of, I love Dr. Alec Wilson's definition and how Alex describes it. And basically the term Two-Spirit represents and celebrates the rich diversity of genders and sexualities found across Indigenous nations and traditions. And it also recognizes that we're from this land, Skszwx, and we have a responsibility to it and to our relations. And that's what I kind of just alluded to when I said Nehiyaw law and roles and obligations and duties as a Cree person as well. And it all really stems back to our relationship to the land, Mother Earth, the land of Skszwx, and everything comes from there, right? So I like that because it really embodies those cultural teachings. Mm-hmm. And I tend to steer away from binary version and stuff. And I also know that everybody has on Turtle Island their own teachings around that. Mm-hmm. So I can only, of course, speak to ours in our teachings in Treaty 6, Treaty 8.
Yeah. I like what you're saying in terms of it's sure it's an identity, but it's more than that. It's a responsibility to a group of people, to society, Cree laws, to the land, to the various beings on that land. And so it's much more than just about yourself.
And that's really about Indigenous people, right? It's not about the individual, it's about the collective. And again, tying it very much so to the responsibilities and roles that the Creator gave us and how we, in Mother Earth, right? And how we relate to that and what we need to do about it and what we, hopefully are teaching our children as we're moving forward, right? There's just so much to consider, just not being an individual.
Right. Yeah, go figure.
me.
Well, and in the Western sense I get is that, what are the rights owed to me? Mm-hmm. And it's a very different dynamic than what am I going to contribute to others, right? And how do I fit within a much larger, ecosystem?
Totally. Yeah. And that's British law, right? Mm-hmm. And the influence, and then having worked in law enforcement, I'm a little familiar with that. Right. And having studied, done my Indigenous studies and, Section 35 and the, Constitution Act, right. And how that all kind of lays out on the land. And then it's Western ideologies, I guess, or Western ways of looking at things, which has always been in conflict with Indigenous ways of knowing, right? So I think those two things are kind of slowly coming together if people are respectful enough. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about why it's important to respect and honor the nation-specific terms, or, there's Cree-specific terms, and, why those are important. Obviously, Two-Spirit is there and it's in the mix and has its own place. but there's also nation-specific ones as well.
Well, you have to remember, if you're engaging with, and I'll say First Nations people, right, or Indigenous people, that usually you may or may not be on their territory, first of all. So if you are, then you need to acknowledge that and kind of be respectful and mindful of not just you're on their territory, but you're kind of relating to them in that manner. You're a guest, and hopefully a very respectful guest. Mm-hmm. So there's that context if you're off reserve or out of the territory. But I think there is that genuine respect of listening, but also trying to be respectful in terminology and have a bit of a awareness and mindfulness of learning. And I think that in itself, people read really quickly. If you're not listening to Indigenous people, they pick up on it really fast, and they'll, especially if you're interrupting them. And so there's that whole thing that happens, right? And I'll just kind of say that as a police officer, formerly, I retired in 2010, but as a member, you're a first responder, so you're automatically engaging in a certain way, trying to get as many details as quickly as possible, sometimes on emergency situations or whatever, right? But there's that way of relating. So by and large, I've heard a study that police officers interrupt people speaking every 7 to 9 seconds.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's intense.
With their questions. I get it. They're trying to screen grab, right? They're trying to do the 5 W's and try to get to the information quickly. But that becomes a habit, and it is not transferable to Indigenous communities when you sit there with an elder or other people, whether it be leadership or anyone, really, and just trying to listen and learn. And that's genuine, and people will know, and they will pick it up really quickly. So, but their terms of what Two-Spirit, some of the teachings that they have and how they do things, I'm not Coast Salish, so I would not, even presume to know. I've heard things, I can only share my experiences, right, around that.
I think that's an important point as well, where it's really important not to share what you've heard from if somebody from a particular nation shares a teaching, it's not for you to carry on with that teaching. So it's keeping it to yourself. And, there's a lot of intellectual property rights, essentially. I mean, that's the Western way of describing what belongs to those Indigenous nations and societies, right?
Totally.
So, it's really important to keep that in mind.
The only time that, for me, because I was adopted by Glenn Douglas, who was the elder in 1983 of July at a traditional adoption ceremony on West Bank First Nation, IR number 10, at a medicine wheel gathering. And Glenn immediately, the two of us just clicked, and he decided that he was going to adopt me. At the time, I was lesbian and working in uniform and Kelowna detachment, and he wanted to adopt me as his daughter. So he declared and let everybody know that we're having a traditional adoption ceremony, and we held a circle. I believe there was a pipe. We had a blanketing. I remember that. He gave me his blanket. I was blanketed, and he kind of made this announcement. And later, probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, I was a little concerned about, I'm a lesbian, I've got to let my elders know, right? And I was a little, okay, because I did know that Glenn he went to residential school, so I was always a little, I wonder how that's going to...
Cautious.
Exactly. So I asked Leslie, his wife, and she just laughed, and she said, I just love to see your father grow. This is going to be great, And he took it in stride. Like, he didn't even, not even a beat was missed.
Wow.
It was just seamless. And he immediately started sharing some of the teachings of the Skszx people. But He did tell me one story of a woman war chief down towards south of the Medicine Line in Colville Nation, which is related to Skszx.
Right.
And this woman war chief was very, very fierce and kick-ass, like quite revered. And I was like, yeah, and that she had many wives as well. And I was immediately thinking, wow, this is just awesome.
How do I sign up?
Yeah, exactly. How do I sign up and how do I get many wives? Unfortunately, once my elders told me what that entailed, and there was a lot of work and responsibility, I kind of thought, no, that's...
Backpedaled
on that one. And what do I know? I was blissfully ignorant. I think I was, probably 27 or 28 at the time. So my learning curve was huge. But yeah, I have a very close relationship to the, Skszx Nation and other family members, Lindley family. I've been a kind of adopted auntie in the 80s, back when I was lesbian, and they were part of my wedding, my traditional wedding in Tofino, and and other friends and family over the years. So, and that's still very much a part of my life. So, very grateful, absolutely grateful for them supporting and loving me, so I could grow up and be a human being, a human being of this earth.
So there's a part of you from them and what they gave you, and how they brought you into their fold, right?
To love me back to, because I was at that really critical time when Glenn adopted me. I was very seriously considering quitting the police force. I was really struggling back then. And I did not know how to handle anything in a good way at all. I was only, I was pretty young, in my early 20s. Well, no, actually at that time it would have been 25, but I think that's pretty young to be saddled with the responsibilities that I had. And like I said, I was pretty immature and I wasn't handling things in a good way, but I am very out in Skszx territory. Everybody knows. Not a big, even when I transitioned to male after I retired from the police force in 2010, no biggie, with my relatives in the Okanagan and, family and other people. So it was, love those guys.
Oh, I can really feel that too.
I just love them.
Where's the Kleenex?
Yeah, I know.
We should have brought a little extra. And that's so profound, because I think about kind of, the next part is, reconnecting. And, one of the questions I had is just, what are some of the nations or communities that of, Indigenous communities that are accepting of Two-Spirit relatives, or their Two-Spirit relatives? I mean, Okanagan sounds like one example, and I'm sure there's others along your path. And I don't know if you just want to share some of that.
Yeah. Firstly, I do need to clarify, because I've known Roxanne and the family from West Bank First Nation, and Glenn and Leslie and Diane Lewis and the elders from OKIB and their families and whatnot. I've known Diane since I was 14.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, but also as a young, and Roxanne, Lindley and the family, as soon as I started working, I met her parents. And went around and introduced myself to the elders on the reserve in 1980, right? Yeah. So there's this, where they know me as a person. So taking that, there's colonization and all the stuff that comes, the eraser of Two-Spirit, the oppression and all the stuff that comes with it around colonization. I would still have those relationships. But yeah, I have received a lot of love and support from not just the Skszx people, but Squamish Nation, who you and I have been doing some work with them for, it's over 3 years now.
Yeah, time flies, eh?
Totally. In the inclusion, the amount of inclusion work that they're doing, it just blows me away. It's just unbelievable, actually. I'm totally shocked and surprised. I think as a cop, formerly, I tend to be a bit cynical maybe overtly cautious.
Fair.
Because I've gotten beaten up quite a bit, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm tend to be like, when it comes to engagement, and I'm always like, well, okay.
When's the shoe gonna drop?
Exactly. So I'm very much aware of that, right?
Yeah.
But my experience with Squamish this time, and not being a cop, it's been just awesome.
Who knew?
Who knew?
You just had to retire.
I know, and just like a feeling the love. Of course, there's still going to be people that don't understand, that don't get it, that went to residential school and have some very bad experiences that haven't healed certain parts of themselves.
Absolutely.
And there's still that hangover, right? This colonization that's done so much harm to our people. But that aside, the work that Squamish Nation has undertaken to this point has been big shout out. And I'll be really honest, such a healing for me as well. That and you were, you know, I was like being overly cautious with, I don't know, should we, you know, I don't know, Kai, well, you know, stick my neck out here.
Right. Where is this going?
Yeah, where is it going? And but to have made full circle again, and to have watched their blanketing ceremony for Two Spirit, to been part of a witness, like to in not as a called witness, but as a person just watching and seeing that, and had just beautiful hearing the teachings from Sierra Baker and other people in the nation, and having such a close working relationship with the Two Spirit advisory group that we've had, that we've shared so many meals together, and worked with the strategic ops team and Pam and the team, of how close we've become. You know.
And Tyler Baker as well. Phenomenal. Yeah.
Totally.
Real commitment and passion, and just love for community, and wanting to see everyone thrive. And, you know, there's some specific and unique things needed for Two Spirit folks, but it's really about everyone together.
Totally. And learning, I think, for me, it's, like I said, I'm still learning. I unlearn and learning once I left the police force. Right? So there was a lot for me to unlearn as well. And the strong voices of our advisory group, and what real engagement looks like, and that reciprocity and respect, and having voice in the decision of, you know, as a group, so many things.
Treading gently.
Totally.
That really resonated for me, because there's a lot of hurt, and so on many sides. And so how not to, you know, continue to hurt. We want to undo that legacy, and how to do that in a good way, a gentle way. And, you know, it may look different than other engagements because of that, right?
Totally.
Holding space for people to share their stories. And some of them are deeply painful, but they need to come out rather than sticking inside, right?
Absolutely. And that's the part, I think it's easier for me to listen and be very present, and very much participate in that in a very different way, right?
Yeah.
So that was really beautiful. And the resources that they have, and the work that they have done, it just is mind-blowing. But a shout out to the IS Men people too, and the work that they're doing to support that, and the circles that they're doing with people, and it's really quite something. And the group that I belong to, a Two Spirit group in Edmonton, xʷməthkվəy. I'm a little slow today. Beaver Hills House, Edmonton, Treaty 6. xʷməthkվəy is the Humble Lodge, which was a 4-year funded program. And that's where I met Dr. Lana Whiskey Jack and Amanda Allman from the U of A, and was invited to be part of this Two Spirit Rites of Passage group, where I met my relative, James McCocus. I mean, we're both from Saddle Lake, but I didn't realize that of course, I was in BC all my life, not in my home territory because of the Sixties Scoop, and I grew up here. And so, I didn't realize that James was my relative. So, in meeting his beautiful parents, Patricia and Eugene, and just being part of that, and the sweat lodge that you and I both participated in many times on a regular basis, but to receive those teachings, to be part of the Two-Spirit group, and always learning, right? Always learning. So, and incredible work that they're doing as well. I just am so grateful in ways that I don't even know how to put into words. Really, you just can't. It'd be something that 5 years and 10 years down the road that I could articulate in a pretty profound way, but not right now, because I think that's how the Creator works anyways. You know, Creator has this incredible vision that I think if we get out of the way and stop tinkering and hanging on to our hurts and our pains and our losses, which need to be healed, for sure. And I've done a whole lifetime of healing, so I can step aside now and not hang on to, you know, certain things, and allow the Creator to come in and work the magic, and just, holy crap, Batman, you know, this happened, and it's like, whoa, you know. So I couldn't even write a better story, and I'm writing my memoir. So, you know, that's the Creator, right? How that works. So, all these beautiful people doing incredible work, right?
Yeah. It's just this really strong revitalization of Two-Spirit people, and reconnecting and getting woven back into communities and nations and societies, and to where, I mean, it's not going to be back to where it was pre-colonization. But it's still really important to reconnect with culture, language, customs, in a way that allow people to heal, and what you're just describing. And I think it's just so powerful, and, you know, many people don't know this is happening if they're not a part of the community, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many, and there's teachings that I haven't received yet. Yeah. So there's things to learn, you know, and it's funny, you know, it's our language is being revitalized as well. And that kind of comes hand in hand with this learning, right? The amount of Cree words that we would have for certain things around Two-Spirit or whatever, right? And that would be tastawanuak, like the in-between people. And that it was James that, you know, I believe he went around to the elders and was spending time with them, learning and receiving teachings. And he cites Vera and Jeffrey LeChance from Red Pheasant, I believe, the elders on that one.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I mean, there's just so much there. And I think, you know, again, colonization has done so much damage to our culture and our people. But I heard an elder say once that, you know, and we were talking about prophecy, but 500 years of winter, and then the awakening, right? And we are in that awakening. And we have been, one prophecy says that when the eagle landed on the moon, that those things have changed. And I don't know if that was the Hopi prophecy or not, but it was that year. Interestingly enough, I believe that it was the first native alcohol and drug treatment center in Turtle Island was that same year. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And and it was Lee Brown I was learning and hearing some of his teachings on that. And here is a person that's a mentor of mine and a friend for a long time. And his teacher was Two-Spirit, you know, down in Washington or Oregon, wherever he was, because he went to university down there. Before I moved to the Okanagan and married in. You run into these incredible people that have run into other incredible people, right? Are those elders and those mentors and teachers and people that know that really, they know their culture, and they know it because it's demonstrated. And it's people, when you hear, if it doesn't come from love, it's not our culture. It's not our teachings. And I've heard that.
Yeah.
Right? I have heard that in more ways than one. And I don't know, the beautiful elders that I know, and that's always love.
Right.
It's always acceptance.
Yeah.
How they teach, very patient and kind with Mounties and other people. Too patient, too kind. But, and they demonstrate it, right? If it doesn't come from love, right? So they're demonstrating that cultural teaching, Cree law, right? Kindness. We don't teach by lateral violence and hitting people over the heads and stuff like that. But so that's how that kind of translates. And it's a good marker for me because I've always known, with Glenn and hearing the elders in my home and over the years and stuff that, it's always how they teach, right? Yeah. Acceptance, love, the circle, inclusion, bringing people into the circle. No one gets left behind, right? Yeah. All those really important things. So, yeah.
It's so important what you say about elders too. They're that connection to the history of Two-Spirit people. And, that to the degree that they have that knowledge, if they've maybe not gone to residential school or kept on holding on to that knowledge despite residential school, that is such an important source of information to reconnect with those past roles, responsibilities held by Two-Spirit people. It varies from community to community, nation to nation. And then, tragically, losing elders through death, and that just being that loss of connection to the past, right?
Right.
One thing I was wondering about with colonization, certainly many people understand, or hopefully many, it varies, but understand the role of residential schools more generally, but they may not know about it specifically for Two-Spirit people. And if you had any insight or thoughts on that, just to kind of paint a bit of a picture of what that was specifically for Two-Spirit folks.
Yeah, well, that was part of Indian policy, and that all started prior to Canada being Canada. And then later, the Indian Act, I forget which year, but the Indian Act basically hasn't changed that much in 100 years, right? So, and, I believe it was Sir John A. Macdonald that implemented the Indian residential school system. Right. And there was talk later on around, South Africa and apartheid looked at what we were doing up here in Canada and kind of implemented it in South Africa. I don't know the exact, details on that. I've only heard it at Indigenous leaders speaking and referencing that. But the idea, and I've heard several things, was to take the Indian out of the child, right? Destroy that and assimilate. And really all that is assimilation policies, acculturation, assimilation. And through that, figuring that if you targeted the women and children, you would disrupt that hugely. Right. You would disrupt the culture. Yeah. And you would, because women being central and the children, right? So taking them and putting them in a residential school, basically forcing Christianity and other religions on them, punishing them, putting them immediately, as soon as they walked in the door, into the binary of male and female. Little girls on this side, little boys, and you can't be together anymore with your brothers and sisters. You can't be in the same, if they're sleeping in different rooms, and that whole thing. I think everyone knows the horror stories and what happened there.
There's also, I read, like hair, there's long hair among, Two-Spirit or boys, and that being cut off. There's like huge spiritual significance.
Oh, huge.
And just egregious,
Totally. Totally trauma. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. In so many different ways. of corporal punishment, of washing their mouths out with soap and other things that were just downright nasty, or physical abuse, sexual abuse, murder, rape, all the nasty stuff, right? But the Two-Spirit were targeted. I mean, they were seen as little boys, perhaps some of them being effeminate, right? Or young girls, being more masculine, or in between, right? So not adhering to the real forced binary of what other people think.
Clothing too, right?
Boys
wear this, girls wear this, and it gets very bifurcated. And separated.
Yeah. They probably didn't have blue and pink, though. They probably just have black uniforms or something.
Not a lot of variety.
Yeah, no.
That's just so important to realize that, this is not just, often people wonder, well, just reconnect. It's like, well, no, it's been severed in very deep, profound wounds, right? That take a long time intergenerationally to heal. And it's not something you just recover at a snap of a finger.
Yeah, because a lot, I don't know what the statistics would be. I really don't. But I've read enough stories and I've heard enough stories and know enough people that, they spoke their language going in there.
Yeah.
Right? 6 years later, they come out. And those are really important years for kids, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you take a 6-year-old, I think there's an age where they pick up language faster. Before the age of 7 or something, or whatever, right? So, and then they're in that environment and all they're hearing is English. Of course, they're punished and beaten if they're speaking their own language. So, of course, that's not going to happen. Maybe if people don't hear them, and they're sneaking around or something, like trying to be quiet. But by and large, no. Several years later, they're going to pop out the other side and they're going to, and then they're going to go home and can't, talk to their people or their family, right? Or their community, or they're going to be different. And then there's this real painful divide, this thing that happens, and this alienation. And of course, like some people, their families, when they lose children, they didn't manage it. Like they, just crushed them. So there was, alcoholism and other things, people trying to cope and whatever. And I think some kids came home and their family wasn't the same family that they left, right? I had a foster brother from Sgsmåkom, from Adams Lake, 2 of them actually, and I remember them trying to go home, right? And Donnie actually was Two-Spirit.
Okay.
My adopted brother, Donnie Oscar, he passed away several years ago, and he was part of the Two-Spirit community in Vancouver for many, many years, part of the GVNCS, the Greater Vancouver Native Cultural Society, back in the 80s and early 90s, in the 90s, But when he tried to go home, it was bad. And you think somebody that's in foster care that had FASD spectrum learning problems and all sorts of stuff, and they try to go home, and it's just not what I think he had hoped or dreamed.
Right.
I think so many of us do. We all go home, or at least we try, or you know what I mean? I mean, it's like salmon spawning, right? So, and I was very, very lucky to have had not just a beautiful homecoming with my Willier family in Sucker Creek, but also more recently my Treaty 6 kin. So, there's that whole thing that happens, and it's just so much grief, so much loss, and a loss of not just Two-Spirit, right, but everything, all part and parcel of it, right?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it makes sense why it takes so long, and it may not go exactly how you imagined, right? Especially that homecoming. I totally understand why people want that warm embrace after, being out in the cold, essentially.
Yeah.
Figuratively and emotionally, spiritually, and then that not quite happening. Or in your case, it did. It just varies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's people that are actually denying the Indian residential school happened, which is kind of comical, actually.
That's
but what
bananas.
Interestingly enough, I was doing some counseling as a contractor on a sensitive work, and we were allowed to go see a counselor. So I went to see an Indigenous counselor, and Laura had asked, is your family anybody go to residential school? And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure they did. I think my dad did, and probably maybe my aunties.
Right.
I don't know, but I can ask, right? So she said, well, if we'll put in an application for we'll get your counseling covered from First Nations Health, right? So I was, okay, I'll go ask.
Right.
So, my father, my Auntie Sally Badger, my Auntie Georgina Willier, my Auntie Vi, who's passed, and my 3 uncles.
Oy.
Yeah.
It's just staggering.
Yeah. And that's, and my brother Cam, and we're only a year difference, right? So, they're
significant.
Significant.
Yeah.
It was shocked the hell out of me, actually. I was like, I always...
You saw like 1 or 2 kind of thing? Or?
Yeah. I actually, and it's funny, growing up at Sixties Scoop, there's that kind of disconnect in your learning your culture, you're learning your family's history and all this kind of stuff. So you're like, that residential school there, just, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I thought, has nothing to do with me. I don't know anybody that went, right? Except for Glenn. Yeah. Right? So I knew Glenn did, and other people on the res that I worked with, and the band members and stuff. But personally, no. It's funny that we do that, that keeping that at arm's length.
Sure.
That's nothing to do with me.
That's protection.
I think so. Yeah. I really do. Yeah. And denial, and so many things that we do to survive, or to not feel pain, or to kind of... So that was part of my growth journey, or my, that journey of kind of reconnecting and learning, right? But yes, very much so. My mother never went because she was raised by her grandparents. They hid her in the bush. Oof. And there are people that did that, right? So, and it's interesting because my mother's very fluent. She's a very well-known elder, culturally, everything, right? And again, works the teachings around... If she had told me once in one of the universities in Alberta that somebody had come to her and they were this whole shaming thing that goes on in ceremony and sweat lodge, and an elder had said this and this and that, and my mother had said, well, I went to that person and corrected that. And that's the same thing. It has to come from love. There's that fundamental... You can tell, certain elders that know their teachings, and ones that are that colonization is kind of really impacted, and they've picked up a few things as well. Not saying that we do have teachings, we do. Fortunately, she did speak to this person and corrected certain things. So so there is work going on with Two-Spirit in different places and spaces all over. Young people that are really learning as Two-Spirit, that are really, it's interesting to see, whether it be in our Two-Spirit group in Edmonton, or in Treaty 6, or Squamish when you're at gatherings, and you look at the blanketing, and they're all out there, and it's like, holy smokes, where did all these people come from?
And they're starving for that culture. They really want it, and they're ready to show up.
Totally.
Sometimes it's complicated, right? With certain cultural spaces, for them to come as they are.
Yeah, and then just the teachings and the diversity of the teachings, right, around that. And I think Sierra was speaking to that very eloquently and knowledgeable. But if you go figure that we come from Mother Earth, and you look at the diversity in life forms, not just in the sea, but other places, do you think
let's connect some dots here.
Yes, please. And plants.
Yeah.
And we are, I mean, I think some people think they're, just because we're human beings, we're supposedly at the top of the food chain or something. Well, no, we're just human beings. We're humble, you know, and we're just, you know, part of the world around us.
Yeah.
And as such, we have diversity on sexuality and our gender, period.
Go figure.
Because we're a life form
What?
on Mother Earth. Can you imagine that?
Gasp.
I know. I'm shocked. Absolutely shocking.
Oh, man. Newsflash.
I know.
There was diversity.
Can you imagine?
That's so beautiful, though, and so important to continuously recognize in ourselves, in the world around us. Yeah, that we're not apart from, we're within. And we are that beautifully expressed diversity.
We have to be.
Yeah.
Our life and our humanity depends on that. And all we have to do is look at what's going on in the world and climate change and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
It's our relationships and our relationship, you know, as humans to one another, but also to Mother Earth and everything else. And it is really about that. And we rely on them for life. Let's just be very clear about that.
Yeah.
They don't need us, but they have teachings when the Mother Earth was made and in the beginning. And the animals know that, and the plants, that we were coming, and those teachings that they were to help us, right? But they don't need us. I think it's really important around relationships. You know, we know who we are. We know as two-spirit people, as human beings as well of this earth. And there's so much to learn and to do. But how we move through the world is in a respectful way, right? Period.
And with humility too, and gratitude. That's the thing I get in, you know, some of these teachings about, you know, animals sacrificing themselves. Like, that just is very touching to me. To your point, we depend on them, and so, like, for me to express that gratitude and being respectful and not, you know, kind of, you know, tossing them aside or, you know, thinking that they're in the way or annoying or need to be, you know, powered over in some way. It's just like, how do I posture towards other beings, right?
Right. And that awareness and that mindful and the respect, right? That you hear stories about Musqueam or Musqueam, buffalo or bison, and them and relating to humans and knowing and having that, you know, how many stories have our people had around that, right? But yeah, so that is so important. And I think that's where it really is, as human beings, as a two-spirit person, you know, I look at my responsibilities as a father, as a mate or a partner or a husband, as a family member, as a community member to SLGBTQIA+, and my responsibilities to my kin in Treaty 6 and my two-spirit group, right? My relations there. I'm uncle. I have responsibilities to people and to the lodge or to the group, right? As well as I have other responsibilities to my other, you know, Treaty 8 kin and my family, or to, you know, my aunties and other things that are going on in my life, right? Ceremony and my relations in the Okanagan Nation as well, my adopted relations. And so there's all those things to consider, but who I am is part of that two-spirit, right? A two-spirit person, and that includes all, you know, all those things. First and foremost, you know, being Indigenous and knowing those things, right?
Yeah. Speaking of responsibility, I think more and more people want to step up and be supporters of two-spirit people, right? They're just getting to know who two-spirit people are. You know, they're trying to understand what the unique challenges are, and we've talked about some of those. There's many more. And so I'm curious if you have any kind of thoughts about how people can show up for Two-Spirit people.
Well, I think right now we're in a time where being trans or Two-Spirit or non-binary, it's a pretty scary, frightening time. That's where allies need to step up. They need to speak out. They need to support, because we may not be in a position to. It's actually, people are getting death threats and all this kind of negative stuff, and a lot of hate in the world, and a lot of things are happening. But allies can influence. Your voice is needed to, no, that's not right. Or I believe, I believe in love. I believe in spirit. I believe in spirituality. And that is love, period. Right? And there's just to support. And if you are not able to do that, some people do it online. You can support Indigenous Two-Spirit groups and donate, because they're always looking for, funding, right? Always. To support them so they can do stuff, cultural activities, or hold circles and do things together. I mean, there's just so much. Now more than ever is the allies really need to step up.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. And sometimes people hesitate and are like, well, I don't know everything, and so I don't know if it's my place, or a whole number of things. I've certainly done that on other topics, right? The long list of, it's not me. But at the end of the day, if something is going off the rails, something somebody says, or denying residential schools, or is Two-Spirit really a thing, right? That's when there's that moment of like, you know what, I heard this podcast, or I read this article, and I know this to be the case, right? And to provide information, especially in mis and disinformation, is just so critical. And you don't need to have it all figured out. Just enough to say, hey, I don't think that's the full picture here. Here's some of what I know. Let's figure out some more together,
And around that too is Two-Spirit have been here since time immemorial.
Absolutely.
Period. Just as other creatures on Mother Earth have lived, blades of grass, birds, four-legged ones, trees, or anything else, what grows and lives in the ocean or in the sky and in the earth, just as much. And it's okay to just stand there and stand up and just say, I'm so-and-so. I don't know very much or nothing at all about Two-Spirit people, but I'm here to stand with you, period. Right? That's it. Stand up. There's an old ceremony they used to have, or, standing up your relatives. I believe that we're all related. The human family is related. We are in all four directions of the world. We are the human family. So the honor of one is the honor of all, right? But we need to remember that, so we need to stand up our relatives, and we may not know your name. But if you were to stand up and just say, hey, I'm here with you, or I support you. I don't know very much, but I'm here. That's all it takes.
It's so simple.
It is very simple. And be a relative. Stand up with us. Because we are the human family, and the only one that can change that is the Creator. So I don't kind of tend to mess with any of the other stuff. I just believe in our teachings as a First Nations person, as a Nehiyaw person.
That's so beautiful. And a few other things that we've heard along the way that I just want to clarify a few things. In particular, sometimes people know that somebody is Indigenous and then know that they're trans, and then kind of put the two together and then apply the term Two-Spirit, right, to that person. And I wondered if you have any thoughts or feedback on that.
Well, I think it's probably, no. First of all, no. And it's up to that person to identify themselves. And they may or not.
Yeah.
They may choose not to. As diverse as Turtle Island is, there is no cookie cutter thing.
I mean, that's so key. I think sometimes people in their keenness to support might have a few pieces and then want to like finish the rest of the story.
For somebody. For somebody.
But that's not appropriate. And
yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that I think in the 90s when that Two-Spirit gathering happened in Manitoba, and that was one, there's probably others, but that was used, and then people started using that term. And I even when I was in the lesbian community in Vancouver in the 90s, and I'd heard it, and people were using it, and I wasn't comfortable with it, to be honest. I did not use it back in the 90s, and it wasn't really until in the 2000s something, right? But because I understood that there was our own languages and terms, right? I knew, having been around Glenn, listening to him speak Okanagan so much in the home, and just hearing other people speak, and there would be, of course there would be, our own language and terms for that, and our own roles and what they did, and that would change from nation to nation. There is, I think we had very interesting roles. Marriage counselors, because we could relate on both sides, or part of the Sundance pole, the ceremonies, or peacemakers, or, I mean, the roles were healers, or some people say shamans. I don't really necessarily like that term, but you can hear a number of different roles helping in some of the work that they were doing to help their community in that collective functioning, carrying knowledge, and very much respected in the communities because they have that unique perspective. The people knew that, so, and it would make sense. That was just something that was there.
Right. Makes sense. And good to respect it in terms of the language that's used, right? And, you know, people have come to that understanding on their own, right? Through their own journey, similar to what you're describing.
Right.
And so we want to respect that journey and listen very carefully to the words that people use for themselves, and then echo that back, you know, like if you need to at all, right?
Yeah.
So that's, and it's so powerful because that language is something that people largely had to probably unearth, and, you know, from elders or connection with community. So it's a hard fought.
Exactly.
And
that's where, you know, when James was going around visiting people, and he cites Vera and Jeffrey LeChance, right, in Red Pheasant, and kind of like academics would cite in their papers, you know, kind of like that. You get this pan-Indianism thing that happens in urban places and spaces in the cities and stuff. There's this kind of thing that, you know, comes together, but I've always been a little more cautious around that. I may not have known, you know, my Cree teachings back then, but I knew enough just being around, you know, the Okanagan people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like they're waiting for you.
Yeah. Totally.
One other common question we get is, can non-Indigenous people use the term Two-Spirit for themselves?
No, absolutely not.
It's a very important clarification.
I was actually...
Say it again for the people at the back.
Please, no cultural appropriation. You know, we can laugh about it, but pretend Indians thing is just so widespread. Yeah. The moment I got around ceremony, they're just like, oh my, it's just popping out everywhere.
Yikes. Out of all the bushes.
Yeah,
like, whoa. It's really important because I think many people just, it's a very powerful word, right?
Yeah.
And so they feel drawn to it.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that you can use it. And I've had to have a few conversations with non-Indigenous folks who are inclined to do so. They're like, it's so beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. And it's not for us, right?
Yeah.
As a non-Indigenous person. And it shows up in surveys too, right? Where we've had to very carefully craft the questions. And this is coming from, Two Spirit Dry Lab. There's like great directions on how to set it up so that non-Indigenous people can't select this. And I think, it's coming, can't speak to everybody, but I think a lot of it is ignorance. And so that's why it's important to talk about it so that people realize, okay, yeah, I see why we can't. It's not just that it's cultural appropriation, it's that, Two Spirit has this history of, harm and, through colonization. And there's this hard fought connection to this word. And, somebody can't just waltz in and pick it up, right? Like, that's insulting.
It is not just offensive, it's insulting. And you want to, there might be a few people, if you were on the res, that just,
watch out.
They might not take too kindly to you.
Yeah.
Just beware.
Well, that's the thing. Just, have that awareness, and certainly education is helpful in that. But, just think before kind of acting. And that's certainly something that I've time and time, learned. But it is about listening, being responsive, being aware. If somebody tells you not to do something, steer clear of it, right?
Totally.
At the end of the day, pretty simple, right?
Yeah. And that's exactly it, because I've ran into that before, where I've tried to explain that to people and they're not listening. First of all, they don't want to listen, right? And then you're like, okay, you're not getting it, you're not getting it. But it really is about respect. And if you're not going to listen to what I have to say as a First Nations person, and that really is pretty telling, right?
Non-starter.
A non-starter, And I would have to remove myself, So
healthy boundaries.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
totally understand that. Now, I'm curious, kind of getting to the end of this amazing episode, and I'm just so thankful and grateful. I always kind of want to have a sense of what's your vision and hope for Two Spirit. So looking into the future, what does the future look like?
The future, well, obviously there will be more Two Spirit people coming up and coming, that will be able to share teachings and carrying on cultural teachings, whether it be in Two Spirit lodges or from the elders, and carried through the generations, where that knowledge is transferred, where it's a vibrant, robust community, where people grow up to be healthy. There's so much, again, through colonization, but for me, Sixties Scoop, a lot of grief, so much stuff to heal.
Yeah.
Please don't take as long as I have, because I'm older now. I'm an old person.
The road is winding sometimes.
Yes. Try not to do the turtle thing, it's or, slow to get it, but that healing journey of coming into yourself, and loving yourself, and being, who you are, and being just, this is me kind of thing, right? And being able to share that goodness with others, but walk in a good way too, right? Yeah.
I think that's so wonderful and beautifully put. It just gives me a lot of hope. And certainly that's something we need right now. And in particular, Two Spirit folks, like to be surrounded with love and respect and supported and brought not just to surviving, but thriving, right?
Go seek your elders, go seek your communities if you can, or go to circles, whether it be in the city or in your communities, and who the healthy people are.
Right.
You know who the elders are that speak with love and kindness and respect. That, we know. You don't, everybody knows, because they have not just a spirit and an aura, but a vibration. Right? So they're, not, you can tell who they are, right? and that you're in a safe, and there are safe places. Sometimes in our own isolated communities, it's only online. And sad to say, but there are groups and there are circles for Two-Spirit people online and activities and things, right? Yeah. So things are happening in Turtle Island, Two-Spirit sun dances and Two-Spirit lodges happening and all sorts of stuff. So it is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is very excited, and it's an important message to be connected in any way possible, right?
Absolutely.
It might look different for different people. And certainly also as an ally of Two-Spirit folks, we are providing a resource for folks. We've got here that we'll link in the show notes, but essentially, no matter who you are, as Chase mentioned, you can support, and it is really important and imperative that we show up for one another. So we've got this lovely resource. Check it out, read it, do some things. It's not just about being, it's about action as well. So, and it doesn't have to be really complicated either. And really important to understand the issues and to take action. So that's my invitation to all your allies out there. And again, thank you so much, Chase. This has been such a wonderful time, and I've really enjoyed it. Obviously, we have a deep friendship that I am just forever grateful for, and I'm so grateful that you're in my life, and I appreciate your time here today.
Oh, thanks, Kai. Oh, you're making me weep.
Oh, no. Tears at the end.
Absolutely. End note.
And we'll say goodbye from here. So thank you again.
You bet. Bye-bye.